Well, welcome back to part two on the cost of production. But before we begin, I'd like to remind you to read your textbook and to also practice in my econ lab. There got many problems in there. It will definitely help you. So in this video here, we're going to take a look at the short run per unit costs. So these are costs that are that the firm finds important and in running the company in the short run. But the total cost curves, don't forget, they are very important also. So your average fixed cost is uh, your first one that you have to take a look at, and that is nothing but your total fixed cost divided by quantity. Average fixed cost is your total fixed cost divided by quantity. Your average variable cost is equal to the total variable cost divided by quantity. And yes, it would help if you memorized these equations. Your average cost is nothing but your total cost divided by quantity. Your average cost can also be obtained by adding together your average fixed cost plus your average variable cost. So depending on data that you are given, average cost can be calculated total fixed cost divided by quantity, or adding together your average fixed cost plus your average variable cost. Here we get into marginal analysis again. The first important one is your marginal cost. Your marginal cost is nothing but the change in total cost divided by quantity. But you can also obtain your marginal cost by doing the change in your total variable cost divided by quantity. So two ways, once again, to determine what your marginal cost is. Once again, remember it's marginal, therefore it's recorded in the middle, and it's also plotted on a graph in the middle. So here's an example from the table below. Derive the values of your average fixed cost plus your average variable cost, average cost, and your marginal cost, and then plot those curves. So here's that table. You're given your total fixed cost, total variable cost, and your total cost, and you have to fill in the final four columns. Here are the answers to the final four columns. The average fixed cost, once again, is your total fixed cost divided by quantity. I strongly encourage everyone to constantly write out these formulas. You will retain them that way. And your average variable cost is your total variable cost divided by quantity. Your average cost, I decided to use your total cost divided by quantity. And once again, your marginal costs, remember it's recorded in the middle. It's the change in your total cost divided by the change in quantity, or you can go the change in total variable cost divided by the change in quantity. So we see here the change in your total variable cost, 40 less 30 divided by 2 less 1. That is 10 over 1, and it's recorded in the middle at 1.5. Or you can go the change in your total costs, 100 less 90 divided by 2 less 1, which again is 10 over 1, which is 10 recorded in the middle. And you would complete the table that way. We are going to then graph this data, and let's take a look at those graphs. Sorry, missed it. There we go. So we have our graphs right here. You will notice I'm going to start off with your total fixed cost, your average fixed cost, and if you follow that line all the way down, it is continuously falling. It approaches zero, but will never reach absolute zero. The next one is your average cost curve. It starts off high, will drop to its lowest point, and then it will rise. It takes on a U shape. The next one is your average variable costs. It starts off at a lower level, but still high, will drop a small amount, will reach its minimum point, and will start to rise again. Again, basically, it has a U shape. Your marginal cost curve starts at the lowest, reaches the minimum, its minimum far below everybody else, and then rises. The interesting thing is that your marginal cost curve will intersect your average variable cost curve and your average cost curve at its lowest point. And it is basically a U shape again. So let's go back to the data. And here we are. So those graphs depict what's happening here. You always have to remember that the table and the graph always show the same information. So you will note that the values of MC, please highlight this, that your marginal cost schedule, column 4, and number 1 are plotted halfway between successive levels of input. It's recorded at 0.5, 1.5, 2.5. Your average fixed cost curve falls continuously as output expands, but it will never reach absolute zero. The average variable cost, your average cost, your marginal cost curves, they are all U-shaped. The marginal cost curve reaches its lowest point at a lower level of output than either the average cost curve or the average variable cost curve. Please highlight that the rising portion of the marginal cost curve intersects the average variable cost curve and the average cost curves at the lowest point. This is the end of the second video. You will notice in the notes that you have in front of you, there are a number of solved problems, solved in detail. Please go through them, practice them, and once again, please remember to read your textbook and to try the problems on my Econ Lab. Remember, your final test is going to be online. Unfortunately, it's online, and you might as well get used to using all the tools that are available to you. Good night.